Hi there, good afternoon or good morning or wherever you are, and welcome to the webinar. And I'm sorry about the slightly delayed start there, but we're here now, and this is the 9th in our design reinvention series, and these are a series of thought pieces looking at design, particular areas in the hospitality industry that are undergoing immense change. And today we are going to pose the question: why aren't more tropical resorts using vernacular architecture that use indigenous materials and local traditional methods? And to answer that and many other questions, we are joined today by a list of global experts on bamboo design. We have Alora Hardy, and Alora is the founder and creative director of Ibuku, and she leads a team in Bali of architects, artisans, engineers, designers, and who are specialists in bamboo. We also have Andrew Dixon, hotelier, and who teamed up with Miles Humphreys and to put together the Cempedak Resort, which is an award-winning private island bamboo-inspired endeavor. We have Charlie Hearn. Charlie Hearn is from Aspirational Architecture and Design Studios, and we're going to hear about his work on Ulaman Eco Retreat in Bali. Delphine King from The Long Run is going to talk about green resorts and hotels. Graham Lamb, architect Graham Lamb, is going to talk about alternative green building materials, including bio-bricks. So we're looking forward to that. And then we're going to wrap up with Bill Barnett, Managing Director of C9 Hotelworks. Right, we're going to get going. Andrew Dixon, Miles Humphreys, what have you got for us, please, gentlemen?
Thanks, David. Hopefully everyone can see my screen now. Can you see the screen? No?
No, not at the moment, no.
Okay, hang on, sorry.
There's a shared function in the bottom.
Oh, sorry.
Just no problem at all. Just while you're working that out, just to remind everyone, there's a Q&A function. Please put in your questions as we go through these, and I will compile them at the end and answer all the questions. I think we're ready to go. Andrew, Miles.
Great, thank you very much, David. Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, many thanks to David and Bill for hosting these talks. I'm honoured to have been invited to present. I've listened to many of your webinars and really enjoyed the topics and the presentation, so I really appreciate it. My name's Andrew Dixon, and together with Miles Humphreys, we're going to give a brief introduction to the designing of Cempedak Island. Firstly, I'd just like to give a little background to put everything in context. I fell into the wonderful world of hospitality rather by accident. I started my career in banking and finance, and partly due to a midlife rethink and partly just a crazy idea, I pulled together a group of friends back in 2004, and we bought the lease on an island, a deserted island called Nicoy. Nicoy is an Indonesian island off the coast of Bintan and less than 100 kilometres from Singapore. It's been quite an experience, although this year has been particularly challenging, as I'm sure it has for everyone on this call. On Nicoy, we built 15 villas using driftwood that was collected from beaches in the area. We designed the accommodation so it was well ventilated, both vertically and horizontally. Fans concealed inside the mosquito nets meant that the rooms do not need air conditioning. In fact, so effective is that we need to provide cotton blankets on the beds. We opened in 2007 with no marketing budget and were surprised at the level of interest we received, and were soon operating at over 90% occupancy and an ADR of US $450 a night. The success of Nicoy got us thinking about what to do next. We secured the lease to nearby Cempedak Island and started thinking about what we were going to build on it. On Nicoy, we built using driftwood, and the concept catered for families. We were keen to try and differentiate Cempedak, and so worked on a concept that had a no kids policy and was built using bamboo. We drew inspiration from several properties around the world, and we particularly liked the wonderful curved lines that could be obtained using bamboo, and felt that this would suit the location and blend in with the huge granite boulders that were spread over the site. Another key element in the concept was that we wanted to build and operate Cempedak as sustainably as possible. At the time, Nikoi had won several awards for its sustainability initiatives, and we felt it was important that we maintained that as a core element in the design. Following on in this vein, we were keen to avoid using aircon and to minimise any disturbance on the site. Building with bamboo helped tick many of these boxes. Reducing our electrical loads by not having air conditioning means that you can save a significant amount of money in infrastructure and operating costs. We engaged Miles Humphreys as our architect early on in the process, and I'm now going to hand over to him to get his perspective on the design and process. Over to you, Miles.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for that summary. It's been a great pleasure and a great adventure working on Cempedak, and I did openly say to Andrew when he first approached me, as I've never tied 2 sticks of bamboo together in my life, but I'll give it a go. On Cempedak, which the actual resort is located on the southern part of a 14-hectare island, the site is strewn with granite boulders of all sizes and configurations. However, using bamboo gave us the flexibility to handpick the position of the various structures where we could find anchor points on and in amongst these massive boulders for the bamboo column bases. With the overall light weight of the bamboo structures, we could avoid having to create major foundations and thus minimize the impact on the site, reduce construction time, and most of all, avoid having to break the incredibly dense granite boulders in all but one location. One of the unique ways of putting these resorts and bamboo structures together is using what they call a maquette. And there's a photo there of one of the villas, the very first one, which are built to show these maquettes every stick of bamboo required in each building, and the completed maquette or skeleton of the building is then taken to site, retained there for the bamboo builders to scale off each bamboo element and complete the construction using only this maquette. Obviously, some drawings are needed for MEPs, but for the skeleton and the whole building, all they needed was this scaled model. Oops, it's the down button there. There are some limitations using bamboo. There are a few. Obviously, I think Andrew will bring this up too. The treating is absolutely critical. And once erected, to make sure that the bamboo itself is protected from any long-term exposure to the sun and the rain, its 2 biggest enemies. Limitations do exist, however, in getting full-length bamboo sticks to the site without having to cut them. In the case of Cempedak, being an island, we were fortunate to be able to use a barge and thus could bring to the site uncut, much larger and bigger dimension sticks, which were needed. What I discovered, and I go on discovering as I do more and more bamboo structures, is there are endless design possibilities using bamboo. And having freely admitted to Andrew, I think we've both walked away as somewhat veterans of the process after 4 years. We were happy to use and very grateful to use 2 young bamboo design specialists based here in Bali. And they helped manifest what I freely call now my Alice in Wonderland project, because it truly is. From this project, I've gone on and built 4 or maybe more structures using bamboo, and I very much look forward to the next project and the next resort, and keep pushing Andrew to buy another island. So that's me. Andrew, back to you.
Thanks, Miles. Just thought we'd quickly mention a couple of the challenges that we had. Firstly, bamboo is in high demand and seem increasingly so, and it's getting difficult to source. In addition, you need to take care that it's sourced at the right time of the year and harvested. And it's best harvested at the end of the dry season. As Miles mentioned, treatment's very important, and I can't emphasize the importance of this enough. We did have a couple of instances where we had a beetle infection, but we were able to get on top of this quite quickly. More efficient treatment processes are being developed, which I believe will improve the penetration of borax into the bamboo and help with the reuse of the chemicals, all of which are natural. The good thing is that it's very easy to replace a piece if it does get damaged. Miles touched on this. Shipping, the larger structural pieces typically come in 14-metre lengths. And if you need to ship everything in a container, this means you have to work at slightly shorter pieces, which would be frustrating. Miles, do you want to quickly touch on these points on the roofing and...
Unmute, right. For the roofing throughout of all the guest pavilions and the guest areas, we used ylang-ylang, although it's increasingly more common now to use bamboo shingles. The ylang-ylang was used here because it could be sourced locally and it had been used successfully before on Nicoy. As we say, bamboo doesn't like to get wet. So using bamboo on the roof, if you're using these other shingle options, you need to put a waterproof layer of aluminium sheeting. But in this case, we stuck to the ylang-ylang grass. One of the great spin-offs from this is the skilled craftsmen, which we brought a team, I think, of 6 to the island initially. Oh, my screen keeps jumping. And these craftsmen, they were able to train locals to become fully effective in the designing and the building, not the designing, the building of these, sorry, I'm losing my text here, the buildings themselves. So this remains in amongst the community. Yes, there's lots of complications using bamboo, but as Andrew said at the outset, it was the ability to curve this particular product that was so challenging and enchanting. And I think even from the few snapshots that you can see, these have come out wonderfully.
So just quickly, we thought we'd touch on why use bamboo to build a resort. Couple of points here. You can push it into all aspects of the design. There's an extraordinary array of ways to use bamboo. The only exception is you cannot use it in any wet areas such as a bathroom, kitchen floors. For our bathrooms, we chose to use a concrete slab and with it a natural stone. But even with this, the concrete slab was supported by the bamboo columns. It was quite impressive how much weight it could take. It's a very flexible material, can work around the site features, as Miles mentioned. Bamboo lets you navigate all types of obstacles without having to modify the ground profile. This is a huge benefit in the case of Cempedak, which is strewn by massive boulders. And from an ecological perspective, it was important to us that it had a light touch. It's very light building material, so you don't need deep piling or any deep foundations. The much reduced weight of a bamboo structure means that there's no significant expenditure on extensive foundations, which also saves construction time. In most cases, you're merely providing anchor points to ensure that the structure stays in place. And then sustainable. Bamboo is a grass and arguably one of the most sustainable building materials available. You can also use many of the offcuts for all manner of things. We built speakers, tables, drink coasters, and even napkin holders. Strength, it has constantly amazed me, the strength of bamboo. We even built a bridge out of it to connect our restaurant and bar areas. Cost, perhaps the biggest cost saving comes from the reduced spend on site preparation, particularly helpful on remote sites. It does require a lot of manual labour to build, so you're not going to use it in places where there's high labour costs. A new vernacular. Miles described the way bamboo is being used today as a reinterpretation of vernacular traditions. I see this as elevating a material that has in the past been denigrated by the fact it is cheap and readily available. That's all. Thank you very much for your interest, everyone.
Yes,
Wow,
thank you.
thanks, gentlemen. And Andrew, Miles, that's a really, really fascinating insight into such a beautiful resort. Congratulations. Elora Hardy, I'm going to hand over to you, please. Founder and creative director of Ibuku. What do you have for us, Laura?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Lovely to be here. I'm just going to try something with share screen, and if it doesn't work, I will switch back to the other way. How's that? Is the image clear?
Perfect. That is crystal clear. Thank you.
Great. So, as with many of you, and as with the topic of our talk today, everything that we do at Ibuku, it really grew out of our choice to use bamboo. And most simply put, we chose bamboo because it's beautiful. And over the past decade, maybe actually 15 years overall with the team, we've created over 100 unique structures on Bali and more so beyond. And I'd say in the absence of like a tried and true vocabulary of bamboo architecture, in the way that most materials have a history of being worked with, we have really had to invent our own rules, building on vernacular, but creating a whole new world. And I'd say what we've learned is really just to listen. Yes, for what we want to create as designers, for sure, but more so to understand what bamboo wants to become, what this material that we love and we've chosen wants to be and wants to become. And so we seek to understand it. We recognize that none of us are experts in this material yet. And we seek to design for its strengths and protect from its vulnerabilities. And so first, to do this, we had to set a whole new industry in motion to harvest, treat, test, process, and design. And that has allowed us to build these permanent structures. 15 years later, there have been 2 poles that we've ever had to retreat, because we've got these things, these basic things figured out that allow us to launch into a world of design. And we've learned so much, so we've started to share it through a program with my brother Oren called Bamboo U. And it's been really fun because part of learning is deeply enhanced by teaching. And this material, just sharing the joy of this material, it's really a marvel of nature's engineering, from its compressive strength, of course, and also its flexibility. In fact, Neil Thomas of Atelier 1, one of the most amazing engineering practices I know of in the world, he compares it to carbon fiber, more so than to steel or concrete, which we traditionally do. And so we've often used these strong compressive poles intact efficiently, using the strength that nature designed over a millennia. And more so, we're playing with it. We're splitting it up and creating these grid-like shell structures. Now imagine the possibilities there when you have the consistency and the control and the regularity, getting it away from the hand craftsmanship. It opens up the possibilities to grow a skyscraper or a city within 4 years and work with it in more standard and conventional ways, but hopefully in expressing new and amazing forms. Classically, we've created these big open living spaces. This is Sharma Springs. It's perfect for the tropics. You let the breeze in. And of course, we also need to complement that with cozy and air conditionable spaces. So how do you contain that without interfering with the curve and the beauty of the material? How do you enclose a curve with planes of glass? That's been a challenge. And what it always comes back to is that we've really grown out of the opportunity to build, like many of you, on these beautiful landscapes that you can't bear to bring a bulldozer to. These beautiful, pristine, curving, contoured, terraced, boulder-ridden sites are just a privilege to have the chance to work on. And I feel that buildings on like terraced ravines, they just can't be rectangular. So that's what's created our conversation with curves, to curve and nestle a building into the contours of the site. And perhaps this helps us remember that we also belong there. It's this sense of belonging that we're chasing. What kind of steps belong inside of a curving structure? That kind of a structure, it needs terrace steps, and more than anything, it needs a door that feels like a portal into a new world, into a new conversation. But sometimes you do find yourself in a box. We were asked to turn this one in Hong Kong into a Balinese landscape for a restaurant. And so we found ways to bring comfort and closeness and texture, essentially to bring nature back into this space. And more we are bringing bamboo overseas. This is a sculptural volcano that is being erected inside of this techie warehouse space in Las Vegas. And we got to escape the issues of code and to some extent the issues of code and engineering for wind load by creating a building within a building. And of course, the first thing that we asked was that they punch a hole in the ceiling to allow natural light into our natural space. And they call it the sanctuary. So this is a sneak peek of Green School Tulum in Mexico. It's an elastically bent grid shell, very carefully engineered. It's a collaboration with Arquitectura Mixta. So for the first time, we in Bali are designing the structure to be refined and then built in Mexico with a type of bamboo that we haven't worked with, and with techniques that they have already been working with for years. And for a green school, which is where all of this came from for us, bamboo, it's a promise to the kids. It's a promise of a bountiful future. The materials that surround the kids on the campus, they know they can count on and they can play with for their lifetimes. It will not run out. So much stress comes from the concern of things running out. And through this understanding and through the work with this material, we've refined this organic approach to space. How do we create flow and connection and harmony in a space beyond the structural elements of the bamboo? How do we translate that? Because really what we want to find is comfort. The form of a building belonging in the context of nature on the site, it can hold us. In a sense, a building can hug us. And it's this balance of connection and of protection, of being enclosed while still being in nature, that returns us to a sense of context and belonging. Actually, more and more to do so, we have been incorporating other natural materials. We take what we have learned from listening to bamboo to listen for what other natural materials belong, how they can have utility and self-expression within these spaces, translating some ibuku magic back into them as we incorporate them. Because as we express each material, they actually have the possibility to let each other shine more. One bamboo beam against a simple wall can shine more than one in an entirely bamboo structure. Now, it comes back to these columns, the natural form of these bamboo columns. It's a friendly form. They invite us, in their similarity to us, to lean against them. And I wonder if natural materials like bamboo, in their uniqueness, I wonder if they actually give us permission to be our own imperfect selves. What does it do to you to be in a space surrounded by structural columns, each one doing its job beautifully for the strength that it has, and each one visibly, noticeably unique and varied? What does that do to us to see the variety and the strength around us? Because humans and other natural things, we are not made up of so many right angles. The world has become a conversation of right angles, and it's not where we belong. This is really all about us. Everything comes back to being about humans. We are selfish creatures. We are self-focused creatures. And always we are looking for how we want to be held, how we want to be contained. Just as we wear our clothes, we relate to the forms around us. They inform us of our sense of self. In fact, they can become layers of ourself. And people want to journey. They want to adventure. And of course, we need shelter. And now more than ever, we are craving travel. We want to be somewhere new. And yet, we also want to be sure that we belong there. One very simple question is, wherever you go, you have to be ready to stay there if you have to. And so where do you want to be quarantined? Where wouldn't you mind ending up quarantined? Now this is what you call a love nest, this little space at Bambuinda in Bali. It's a place for engagements anniversaries. It has said a number of conceptions, and I don't doubt it. But that's the power of space. What are the spaces that we are creating for? What's supposed to happen there? A bed, it doesn't have to be just a rectangular mattress in a box. Imagine waking up here. Have you ever woken up from a nap in a park, say, under the branches of a tree and looked up? And I wonder if we have actually forgotten what we need to see around us. We have spent forever as builders in the world, we have spent forever building to protect ourselves. And as a default, we have ended up shutting ourselves off. The texture also, the texture of a floor. Can it ground us? Can it give us a sense of closeness? There's this element of mystery right now to the future. What will really be worth traveling for? How do we make that journey just deeply worthwhile? Because adventure, being in a new space, what it does is it makes something new possible within ourselves. And we have all lately found ourselves stretching the limits of health and safety to have the opportunity to be close to the people that we love. And also just for the chance to get outside, or if not to get outside, to at least be close to nature. It's time that we remembered that we are nature. We can remind people through structures, through spaces, that it is all one thing, it is all connected. And it's in our hands, really, to create our future memories, to design spaces that allow for people's future memories to happen. And more importantly than that, those memories inform experiences which inform our future selves. This is a whole new world, and we're just looking for where we belong. Thank you.
Wow, Laura Hardy, thank you so much. Your love of bamboo just shines through. The possibilities, the conversation with curves, the natural connection, the power of space. I mean, I could go on. Thank you very much. There's been a number of questions, and I'm going to ask you those at the end. But right, let's move on. Charlie Hearn, are you with us from Inspiral Architecture and Design?
Hi, yes, here.
Charlie, welcome.
How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, I'll get started. Let's see.
Sure.
Okay, let's get this. Okay, everybody see this? See my screen?
Yes, very clearly,
okay.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, I'll just start here with a little case study of a project that's just recently opened in Bali as well. This is called Ulaman Eco Resorts. It's based in an area called Kaba Kaba. Beautiful area with rolling hills, surrounding rice fields and a forest, and a meandering river that goes through the site. We were asked to do this project initially as a private home, but as we started the project and the clients got more enthused about the project, it gradually turned into this eco resort with a whole number of villas, yoga studio, a restaurant area and a large pool. And actually we're currently doing an extension on it at the moment, since the project seems to be very successful in its makeup, and the client's very happy with it. So we bought the land on the other side, so it's gradually turning to a more significant facility with spa and restaurants and more units. So if I go into it, so I was just looking at this, when we did this resort, when we approach any form of architecture, you know, one of the briefs were to make it as sustainable as possible. This is something very much a core of our design strategy. I think there's a lot of greenwashing that goes around, and you know, we can take token aspects like materials and things, but I really wanted to do something essentially that throughout its operation, its makeup, was a genuinely considered form of architecture that embraces its site and the whole way it exists in a sustainable manner. So I've got a little diagram here, and what we kind of tend to do when we look at a project, we look at the various aspects of design which create our programs. So of course, we look at the environmental aspects, we look at the contextual parts, and then there's all the pragmatic elements in terms of circulation, program, you know, economic aspects as well. How do these all stack up? How do you convince a client to go the sustainable route? And that a lot of the time you have to show, you know, really lay it out to see how actually your long-term program being sustainable, you actually get, there is a very good return of investment on this. So when we bring this up, we'll always look at, I mean, where I've highlighted the environmental and contextual, that really does inform the architecture. So with our first aspects that we tackled, we looked at the land. Obviously, this is the essential part. What is its ecology? How are we impacting its ground? What's the effects of the vegetation? And then can we create some kind of biosynergy between the architecture and the natural environment? So in this site, you can see it's kind of nestled in a jungle area. So we were very, very conscious about not taking down any trees. We wanted the trees, we wanted the ecology to be maintained throughout the project. So you can see in some aspects, even we had trees growing through the buildings. You know, we didn't design it in a way so, you know, trees are cut down for this picture shot. You know, sometimes I find, you know, you get a project and there's a beautiful tree there and it just doesn't fit. So we kept the trees and made our buildings fit around all this natural vegetation. And then the next aspect of the site was to think of the actual land itself in terms of the earth. I've done some rammed earth projects before in Bali, but I think this is probably the first significant one where rammed earth is not just used as a feature wall, it's used extensively throughout the whole project in every aspect we could. So for those who are not sure what rammed earth is, it's essentially we're taking the earth from the ground, which has been dug up for foundations and groundworks, and we put it into formwork to create the shapes of all our walls. And this formwork is then holds the earth as it's rammed within, layer by layer. And we can add natural oxides and different colored tones, create all these beautiful layers of color. It's a very labor-intensive process, but it's a process that's been used for thousands of years. I mean, even the Great Wall of China uses rammed earth technology to form it. So it's a very long-lasting material and very strong in terms of its compressive strength to support the building. So here's a photo of it on site during the construction. So this is what happens when we take away the formwork and we show all these natural lines of the walls. And it was great actually, because this was really interesting because the client wasn't familiar with rammed earth at all. And he embraced it once we could prove its effectiveness. So during the project, we employed the local village. And so everyone from the village, maybe 30, 40 people were there, ramming, mixing the earth, compacting it. So it became a very integrated project with the community. And of course, we use bamboo as well, as such as the subject. And I think rammed earth and bamboo work wonderfully well together. Just you can see from the way lines flow from one point to another, the color tones. And what we did in this respect with bamboo, we wanted to lift it up a little bit. So we put a weather shield coating with the bamboo that's lightened all the bamboo up. So we kind of whitewashed to an extent a lot of the bamboo, just bring the tones up to create a sense of lightness, especially when you're in jungle areas where where there's a lot of shade and you know, light penetrates in certain ways, it's nice to bring a bit of lightness in there that reflects the light around. Of course, we use this with a lot of other materials, but the bamboo really does form the elements. It forms the shape of the building. It creates that womb-like interior that we've always essentially loved to incubate the user within. So lines flow, we have different forms of colors, and we used it throughout every aspect, from the interior to the bedrooms, the main structures, to the yoga studio. And yes, it is a wonderful material, incredibly sustainable. And a lot of the bamboo actually also was taken directly from the site within where the building was located. Good wood. So another element of material is using the correct timbers. In all our projects, we refuse to use any timber rainforests. So we always would use plantation woods like teak. We would use recycled teak, recycled timbers. And again, we can combine this with the architecture to create these really interesting spaces. And something very tactile as well. I mean, there is a beauty about old wood. When you touch it, when you feel it, it really kind of glows. So we're really happy to use that with the project. And then in terms of other materials as well, I mean, everything we try and use is locally sourced. We're lucky being in Indonesia, where we have a massive array of different stones that can be embedded into the project. And we like to use materials in a way that's where the embodied energy is very low. I think that's one major factor that brings up the idea of an eco resort, is keeping the embodied energy to an absolute minimum. So we also think of that in terms of maintenance. How do we protect our materials when things are exposed? What kind of coatings can be used to minimize maintenance? But again, is an energy usage throughout. We also very concerned about the water on the site. We go through the whole aspect of recycling water, grey water systems. We use shower heads that minimize water consumption. We have bioseptic systems, which mean that the land isn't contaminated, and any water usage goes back into the ground. It's not flushed out towards river channels. Because as we do know, Bali does have a major water shortage problem from construction. So where we can save water, we minimize energy, and we're maintaining the water table within the land. The other aspect of water that we've used is by taking on this river within the site. So we're using this to create energy. So we've installed a micro hydroelectric generator that feeds off the small river that comes through the site. We're lucky with the site that has different levels. So we can use the levels to create storage tanks that feed a micro hydroelectric generator, which in this case, I mean, one generator can generate 20 kVA of electricity. So we can put a number of these throughout the site to create the power required. And then I think maybe perhaps this has been touched on before, but is this sense of connection. You know, I think bamboo is just not just something visually. Of course, it's very beautiful, but it's not just a visual element that that highlights the architecture and our living conditions. I think it's the whole approach, where if we can highlight and frame aspects of our natural environment, it creates a deep connection to ourselves that embody this kind of living, this kind of way of existence, where we know we have to have some kind of harmony with something which is essentially very man-made, which is architecture, that is harmonized with nature as as a way to naturally exist. So with these kind of forms, with this kind of way it's integrated into the site, we create a kind of symbolism that I think really penetrates our viewpoint and attitudes to how we can exist. Okay, thank you.
Charlie Hearn, thank you very much indeed. Fascinating stuff. Rammed earth, good wood. These are really incredible concepts. I love rammed earth in particular. Micro hydroelectric. There's some really, really useful points there. Thanks so much for that. We're going to go to Delphine King. Delphine, are you with us from the long run?
Yes, David. Thank you. I am.
Delphine, hi. Good.
Hi. Thanks for having me. Let me share my screen. Hopefully.
Green resorts and hotels and their synergies with the travel world. What have you got for us?
It's coming.
Sure it is.
Where's the new share? Okay. Okay, well, thank you for having me. I loved, the previous presentations. I think bamboo embodies the sustainability we're talking about with the long run, the sustainability, the beauty, the connection with nature. And with talking about the long run, I think I'm going to zoom out slightly on, how do we go beyond architecture, design? Already Charlie talked about it, integrating the building in the ecosystem, looking at resources and how to use them effectively. So with the long run, we're really looking, zooming out, doing an overview of how do we design, how do we conceptualize sustainability in a resort context. So why we're here as the long run, and I'll tell you what we are. It's really about driving positive change through tourism. And why tourism? Because tourism is a way to showcase, has the potential to showcase change and transform people, and a lot of people, if done right. We've been, the long run's been here for 10 years, and it was time then, but it's certainly time now to review how we do business. I think we're all now aware of all the social and environmental challenges we face, but the exciting thing is that it's not only the conservation minds or social minds, it's everyone is aware and everyone wants to do its bit. So who
Delphine,
we are?
hi, your screen is blank.
Oh, sorry. Screen is blank. I am, okay. New share. Let me. Is that?
I'm afraid to say it's still very black.
Still, okay. Okay, let me try again. Okay. Anything now?
Yes. Yes. Maybe we just need to focus on the driving positive change through tourism.
Yeah.
Maybe we click there and go full screen on that one.
Do you?
There we go.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
So I was talking about it's time to change. So who we are, we're really a global network of properties around the world that are using tourism to protect nature and improve livelihoods of people. I mean, in a nutshell, we're all around the world, quite thinly spread, but it's a movement of passionate people who want to use their business as a force for good. And what we do really is a platform for exchange, is bringing people together, just as we were talking about this togetherness, supporting and showcasing what tourism can do if thought through. The long run, we have three, you know, there's three big pillars of the long run. One is collaboration, where you know, we believe that together we can scale up, we can really affect change, and we can do much more together than on our own, obviously. We have a balanced approach to sustainability, and that's what I want to talk about really. And we also have a standard, the Global Ecosphere Retreat Standard, which is a milestone in a journey, as you'll discover. When I talk about the power of collaboration together, the long run members protect 23 million acres of nature, and they impact the lives of 750,000 people. These are just, it's just to showcase that by bringing people together, we can have a bigger voice and a bigger voice for change, and with significant impact. But what I want to talk about really is the 4Cs framework. And, you know, listening to the bamboo story, you will see how this fits in, within the lens that we use to look at sustainability. But basically, in the long run, we look at sustainability through the lens of conservation, community, culture, and commerce. And with the idea that to have a long-term you know, natural capital and social and thriving society in the long term, we need to balance these 4 dimensions. And they're complex and they interact, you know, dynamically. And it's about how do we manage to achieve a balance. It's also a very tangible framework to integrate sustainability within the operations of a business, of a tourism resort. It helps in decision making, and I think you've seen with Charlie and Elora and Nikoi how the building has embodied this connection between these four dimensions. The idea behind the 4Cs is really a slight shift in mindset, actually a big shift in mindset for some, but obviously less so for others. One is about the fact that we're not, you know, nowadays it's not enough to try and mitigate our negative impact. We need to seek positive impact. And I think this is the drive behind what we're doing. We all agree that we'll never be there, so it's a journey. Perfection doesn't exist yet, nearly there, but in many cases not, and it's a long-term journey. It's about collaborating, but it's also about creating inclusivity, togetherness. We're all together on this journey, and how do we bring others on this path? It's about caring rather than exploiting, and very importantly, it's about shifting from a 3-year, you know, business cycle mindset to a 100-year thinking. What is it that we want to where is it that we want to live in? As Elora said, you know, where is it that we're going to be stuck for the next 100 years? How do we want to contribute to that landscape, to that communities that we belong to the world we're part of? This is very, you know, square, but this is what the framework looks like, and that's that underpin the Global Ecosphere Retreat Standards, if you ask about the standard. But I just want you to see here that when we look at conservation, of course, we look at environmental management practices. So this is all the water, renewable energy, the landscaping, the mitigating our environmental footprint, but it's also about how do we drive biodiversity conservation within and outside our properties? Community is, you know, similar. We're always looking in and we're looking out, you know, within ourselves. How can we demonstrate best practice? And then how do we include others in our journey? Culture, it's how do we integrate the sense of place, and how do we preserve a tradition, the identity of a place, the identity of the peoples that we're living with. And I think this comes through so well with the bamboo, which is another take, or, you know, new architecture with vernacular materials, vernacular skills. And the fourth aspect, which is commerce, how do we sustain this? you know, for 100 years. And the commerce is the fuel. But on the other hand, the commerce benefits strongly of the richness of the 3 other seas. So very quickly, we had Nicole speak earlier. I just wanted to showcase a bit, you know, when we look at Nicole, what are we looking at in the long run? We're looking at a property that has outstanding record in environmental management, landscape design, minimizing, you know, resource use, but it's also a property that's seeking to conserve a huge piece of marinescape, restoring reef, protecting species. Similarly, community, a really strong property in terms of engaging its staff in its journey, but it's also understanding how do we empower the community to become part of this journey. And Nicole, through its Island Foundation, has chosen education as a focus and has impacted many children, many teachers, but also a whole island to be able to welcome sustainable tourism. The journey of improvement, how we call it, really starts with aspirational goals. Again, like I was saying, is 100, you know, what do I want the landscape to look like? What do I want? Where do I want to live? How do I want to live? How do I want to connect with the place I live in? And how do I want the people to thrive around me? So the journey in the long run is very much one of self-reflection, of support, of exchange, of mutual learning, but it's also about planning, and it's also about strategic decision-making around sustainability. Here we're talking about sustainability being the DNA of the business rather than a project on the side. And again, throughout the talks that we've had today, I think Bamboo represents this very strongly because it's at the heart of what the resort is. But the idea is really, it's a continuous improvement and pushing boundaries, continuously rethinking, and you can ask Andrew about that. So members of the long run, really, they own, manage, or influence biodiversity areas, and that's the premise to become a long run member. But it's about protecting nature, it's about pushing boundaries, and certainly it's about sharing, learning, and getting challenged. Thank you.
Thank you. What fantastic, Delphine King. That's absolutely wonderful. And there's been a few questions that have come in, and I'm going to be asking you those in just a second. Graham, so sorry for keeping you waiting, and you're still with us. That's much appreciated. Graham Lamb, alternative green building materials. I know you've not been well lately too, so particularly thank you for hanging on. Alternative green building materials, including bio bricks. What do you have for us, Graham?
Okay, hi. Yeah, I'll be talking about alternative building materials, natural building and mycelium. So let's have a look. Let's share. Let me know when you have it here. Let's have a look. Share screen.
Okay, looking good.
Have you got it?
Just need to go full screen.
Let's go full screen.
There we go. We're good to go. Thank you, Graham.
Okay, good. So what is natural building? It's a range of building systems and materials with a major emphasis on sustainability. It's made or formed of natural resources which are renewable and plentiful. So why natural building? So cement production produces 8% of greenhouse gases. Mining for conventional and construction materials, sand and stone, environmental degradation and pollution. There's a high demand on fossil fuels to produce modern materials and provide energy to light and cool our buildings. Modern construction processes are generally very wasteful. So advantages of natural building, obviously materials are biodegradable. They use less chemicals, which are less polluting to the indoor air quality. Excellent thermal properties, excellent acoustic properties, assist with moisture control, fireproof, resilient in extreme climates, earthquake proof, low cost and zero waste. So the Adobe Earth brick, this is a great material. I love the simplicity of the material. It's a minimal process. It relies on human labor rather than technology. Applicable to all, to our lives, regardless of our financial situation. It's a low-cost building material and effective in creating a comfortable environment. So one of the first known building materials to man, a simple combination of clay, sand, and agricultural waste. One of the most important things with this material is the consistency. It's so crucial to get the structure into the material in the correct moisture. Agricultural waste adds the structure to the material. The material is then pressed into a timber formwork to provide the brick. The brick is sun-dried and not fired, so this is a very low carbon solution. It's got excellent thermal mass properties, keeps the building cool in hot climates, and keeps the buildings warm in cold climates. So there's a couple of key things that you've got to incorporate into your design when working with this material. Raised slab and a long roof eaves protects the walls from water. A drainage gully should take the water away from the foot of the wall, which is built on a very light floating foundation. This is one of our early sketches for Blue Tree's Eco Hub project in Phuket. Another sketch for this. This is Kengo Kuma's modern application for the Adobe Museum repository in Japan. This shows the material in a more modern day context. Compressed earth brick is essentially the same recipe as the Adobe brick, and it's stabilized using hydrated lime or Portland cement. It's damp pressed soil into a mechanical press, very low carbon footprint. As you can see here, this is the mechanical press. You need to use around 3,000 PSI of pressure. When the brick is pressed, it's reduced to about half the size of volume. What I do love about this material is the versatility. It's incredibly versatile. It can be pressed into any form to suit any functional requirement. It's a modular design and interlocking, so CEB offers great quality control and flexibility. Essentially, you can design, it can be tailored to any kind of form and incorporate structure and mechanical installations. The additional structure makes this an earthquake-proof building material, and it's also fire retardant. This is a project we've been working on in Bangkok. This has got 3 types of compressed earth brick within the design. This is also another image of that project. This has been combined with reclaimed charred timber. Another Super Adobe Earth, this is essentially the same material, same ingredients, which are pressed into a recycled rice sack that essentially form a large compressed earth brick. Essentially, the soil can be compressed into a tube-like form, which would form a dome-like structure, or can be laid in a more conventional brick layout. The next material that I'd like to talk about is essentially it's an unusual building material from within the fungi kingdom. It's called Mycelium. This is a multicellular organism living underfoot. It's essentially responsible for decomposition within nature, and it's also the network that plants and trees use to transport nutrients from mother to baby. This material can be basically grown through a structural substrate into any given form. It's stronger than pound for pound than concrete. IKEA recently used the material to form a packaging series for its products. Mycelium is growing in popularity in the US, and it's increasingly used for product design of all kinds. This gives us the ability to grow our own environments. These are a couple of experiments from the studio that we're working with this year. This is using oyster mushrooms for the mycelium. It develops a real personality of its own. It's a really wonderful material to work with. Some of the experiments were very successful, some not. It's a really interesting material. Excellent acoustic and thermal insulation properties, fire retardant and mold resistant. Mycelium can be grown into building blocks with an internal structural framework Mycotech currently have a tree structure for sale at the moment. This particular exhibition, the tree structure is for sale at the moment. This is a Myco tree by Mycotech. So structural, lightweight, and extremely versatile. This is an insight into how the material can start to engage with architecture and art. The interlocking designs can form mycelium bricks. It can be grown into modular designs to create literally any building form. It's fire retardant, mold resistant, and again, strong under compression. This is the Hi-Fi by The Living in New York City. This is a structural framework embedded with mycelium bricks. It's the winning entry for the Young Architects competition in New York. Mycelium can be also grown to produce a leather-like material and as a replacement for leather. Big in the US, but Mycotech in Indonesia are developing the product also. We're looking to import this as the first supplier within Thailand. Essentially, this communicates where mycelium leather interacts with nature and becomes a mixture of art, science, and fashion. Thank you.
Wow. Graham Lamb, thank you very much for that. We sped through that a little bit, but God, there's some serious content in there. Thank you. You know, the bricks, bio bricks, compressed earth, mycelium. I mean, what incredible materials. Right, Bill Barnett, please. I'm just going to hand over to you. We're getting a little short of time, but let's hand over to you. Then we're going to take a few quick questions. Bill.
Hi, David, and thanks so much. I think, you know, this is such a great session because what we like about these things is designers were meant to design things. They weren't just meant to be an architect and interior designers. Arts and crafts are through the whole process. What we like about sustainable designing is it's that whole arts to crafts thing where everything is being designed. Again, give architects credit, design the entire process. That's a great opportunity to be able to stretch out and see this whole dogma of design go through the whole process, where we're not having the separation of disciplines and everything else. It goes back to basics. And that's probably one of the best things today we're talking about. I think certainly it was when we're talking about native materials, going back and using bamboo, using Adobe bricks, you know, we talked about rattan, we've talked about this technology, noble materials and native materials which are available locally. We're not shipping something from Italy, you're not shipping something from South America for a project. You're being environmentally friendly by using materials available, and you're using that as part of the process. And I think that's really important. I think because it takes you back to your site conditions. And this is when an architect goes, you shouldn't go to a site for a sustainable resort and say, oh, maybe we could have a pyramid here, or maybe we should have a giant Buddha or something else. It's what is on the site? What are those conditions? Is it next to a river? What materials are available in your neighborhood? That whole process is developed about understanding your site. I think too often I've seen projects where architects don't even visit a site. It's all done remotely. They might have one site visit. The good thing about sustainable design is let your architect go there, let them sleep on site, let them spend days walking the site and understand those conditions. And I think that's something that's been lost with architecture because there's no understanding of those basic site conditions, which is why we end up resorts which look like they belong somewhere else. There's no sense of place. I think certainly when we talk about the elements and understanding where the sun rises and the sun sets, where we see the trees on the site, what are those other conditions with the wind and everything else, and understanding the elements, that's so important to that site, understanding and designing for this. So many projects we do now for hotels, we want to have our environmental consultants on early so we start understanding all of these natural conditions. When we start projects now, certainly with sustainable resorts, 3 of our main key project members are landscape architect. Landscape architect because you're dealing with the earth, you're dealing with the site, you're dealing with those conditions around you and understanding it. They're the ones to reach down the dirt and say, what is this site all about? Environmental and services engineering. These guys shouldn't be at the very end when you're saying, should we put in solar or not? They should be hand in hand with your architect at the beginning saying, where does the sun rise? Where does the sun set? How much ventilation do we have? How much are we going to be able to conserve energy? And then also the chef and bee, because ultimately what's important in a destination resort, you're not staying in a Marriott, you're not staying in this type of resort. You're going to be eating there morning, noon, and night. Have great food. So involve your chef and doing that, understanding to have great food and unique food. Yesterday, we had a great farm to fork seminar where we're talking with that trend in having gardens attached to resorts or having farm to table experiences. Again, that's certainly a more noble thing than having a a menu with a fucking club sandwich, right? You know, eat the food from where you're going to and experience that location. So important, you know? And I think certainly when we look at some key points in terms of what we're looking at, what are those top trends? We like bamboo because it's not permanent, because nothing is permanent in life. There's only two permanent things in life. You know, you're born and you're going to die. That's the only sure thing in this life, right? And resorts don't need to last for 50 years. They don't need to last for 100 years. They can be reinvented as technology changes, as materials change. I think that is important now when we look at resorts too, because building a cost-effective resort, maybe you're not going to be spending as much. So it's using materials which are sourced locally and saying, maybe this is going to be here for 10 years, for 20 years, and then it's going to evolve. You know, evolution is a good thing. You know, prefab, pop-ups, all these different kinds of ideas where we're saying what can be put up at a lower cost and also be native to the site as well. You know, repurposing, conversions, this certainly is the future because we have great materials available on sites. Why do we have to tear down buildings? Why can't we conserve those buildings, conserve the materials, not just throw it away and import things from China or something else, right? Embrace agriculture. Agriculture is noble again. It's a great thing. We're back to the farm because that's what feeds us. Know where your food comes from. What is that food? Use it in your menus. Nature is the new luxury. After COVID-19, the one thing we understand is let's get outside. We don't want to be in the gym. We don't want to do our yoga inside a room. We want to get outside the space and understand that. All-inclusive communal experiences where you're eating with your neighbors. We're going back to that. You know, I know Andrew, in Nikoi, that's one of the great experiences about eating communally together. Health and wellness, not just wellness. Wellness is finished. You know, it's about the healthy part of that as well. Exercise, getting outdoors, education, and certainly multitasking, non-traditional in this space. You don't need that separation. Too much hoteling where you have the back of office and the front of house and everything else in a hotel. Staff who can do more than one thing. Nobody wants to spend their life as a waiter or waitress and do nothing else. People have aspirations to go and do other things as well. So, you know, with these smaller sustainable resorts, somebody who makes your bed may be the same person who checks you in, maybe the same person who takes you on a nature walk, right? And scale, we're scaling better. One thing that COVID-19 has taught us is small is beautiful as well. We don't need to scale everything up. There's going to be less tourists for the next 3-4 years and maybe even a longer period. So small is better. And again, Instagram moments, better or worse. You know, like it or not, people love to take the pictures. That's what they're going to look at. When they look at the structures we're talking about, it's a key trend. You know, going quickly, I know we're almost out of time. I think some things we want to look at certainly in terms of a sustainable resort, the challenges. There's not always a chase for hotel chain. Yesterday, I was talking to Neil Jacobs from Six Senses, but after we get past Six Senses, there's not a lot of sustainable hotel groups out there. So you have independent operators. Passion projects, no economic realities. Often you have these type of sites. Airlift. So many sites I go to and the guy said, why did you build a hotel here? Because I own the land. You know, you can't stay there if you can't get there. So if you can't get there, there's no point sometimes to build a hotel. Scaling is hard. Revolving management, certainly. Again, there's lots of challenges you'll see here. And I think at the end of the day, there's too much focus on product. This is a people business, okay? People make this tick. And without the human element of what we're doing, no matter COVID-19 or no touch zone or whatever else, people drive it. Embracing your community and embracing the culture of those staff and not importing staff from faraway lands. That's so important. I think certainly those are some of the challenges. I think something I always tell my clients is this, you know, it's very hard collectively, and you can say we have high-tech companies and everything else, but I still am a firm believer that to be truly creative and create a great project, be the developer, be single-minded, right? Have tunnel vision, look at one thing, focus on that one thing, be dogmatic and obsessed with every detail, because that's how we create great projects and great things. David, back to you.
Bill, thank you. Well, apart from knocking the club sandwich, that was brilliant. What I thought was particularly interesting was your comment on impermanence, because nearly every single question that's come in so far is about permanence. People want to build things to last. So I'm gonna get straight to that, and I'm gonna start with Alora. Alora, what's the lifespan of bamboo? How do you treat it so it can just last long?
You have to treat it properly to begin with. You have to select it properly, and you have to get the salt in and the sugar out. There's a few ways to do that, but you've got to do that, or you just have no business building anything that's supposed to be long lasting. Once you've done that, you can count on it the way you can count on a wooden structure. You got to take some care of it, but there are wooden structures that are hundreds of years old. And the same will be true for bamboo structures, the ones that were done properly. Now, in doing that, you have to also design it properly. Most bamboo buildings out there are overexposed to the elements and have structural elements that will need to be replaced, the exterior structural elements. Some of them are being done with techniques that are not properly investigated, that are perhaps copied from something that's seen somewhere else, and are not detailed in ways that will make them be able to last a long time. So there are the majority of bamboo structures that are being built or have been built in the past decade, including potentially some of ours, of course, are not perfectly done in such a way that make them long lasting. Others may be over-engineered. We don't have the data to say yet. We have to go forward very carefully and with great care in the investigation. More and more data is needed to study the different techniques, especially when we cut into the poles, like to create a rub-rub arch. We have to be extremely cognizant of the strength of the material, and then where we get in its way, and where we hurt it, and where we help it. And so, but fundamentally speaking, a bamboo building that is properly treated and properly designed will last hundreds of years, and it needs a little
hundreds of years.
Hundreds of years. There are 100-year-old, multiple 100 years old wooden structures, aren't there?
I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
Okay, it's great to hear, Andrew Dixon. How about the elements? There's been a lot of talk about don't expose these materials to the elements, rain, for example. So you can't get bamboo wet?
Yeah, so it doesn't like to be outside at all. So as Alora mentioned, design in a way that you've got large overhanging roofs that provide rain and sun protection. And we've found actually, as the bamboo has got older, it's actually become more resistant to any insects because it's dried out. As Alora mentioned, those sugars that the insects are after have been drained out of the bamboo, dried out. So it's not so attractive meal. But then it's also you've got to be careful that it doesn't like to go into the ground. Nice a proper footing, so it's off the ground. They say it likes an umbrella and gumboots, and then you're fine.
Yeah, somebody else. Have any of you used bamboo as reinforcement for concrete?
Ooh, yeah, I did that beautifully.
Ah, good. So it is possible. Okay, great. Charlie, I'm gonna have to go quickly because we're pretty much out of time. Charlie, how do you bend bamboo? So there's been a lot of questions. Bamboo is typically seen as a long, straight, and very strong material. What's all this bending stuff about? How do you do that?
Yeah, there's a number of different techniques. I mean, there's ways of bending it where you segment it into parts and wrap it with smaller pieces. You can bind it in strips and tying it together. It depends on your spans. You can use 3 or 4 pieces of bamboo to make huge arches. I mean, there's examples in China where they have bamboos with massive spans covering big distances. So it depends on the context of where you want to put your arches, but essentially the smaller pieces are easier to bend, but a lot of the time it's a combination with various pieces of bamboo interlocking to ensure they're strong and structural.
Okay, that's great. I think I just about followed you. I'm sure the experts who are still with us in the audience would have followed that too. Graham, bricks. Your conversation about bricks, I thought was fascinating, particularly Mycelium, if I got the pronunciation right. How about the durability? As I say, I'm sorry, a lot of the questions about durability here. Durability of these bricks, can they get wet?
Yes, absolutely, yes, no problem, yeah.
Okay, so we're looking at hundreds of years here?
No, we're not. I think it's about probably between 5 and 10 years. It obviously would need protecting from the elements somewhat, yeah. I think the installation, the building that you saw there is a temporary structure exhibition. Right. So, but I think in a protected environment, I think this could probably work for 5 to 10 years, yeah. Okay.
Laura, hi. We've got an addition to our panel today. Hello there. Right, Delphine, just very quickly, sustainability in the overall piece. How important is this for travel and tourism?
I think it's becoming really essential. I think there's no choice. I think people are more and more aware of their impact nowadays and don't want to feel guilty. But I think from our perspective as more, resorts, I think we have the duty to do what we can to invest in what we have, and for it to be permanent. In this case, for nature, for the ecosystem we all depend on, and you depend on for business as well, to last forever, and the communities around us to thrive out of it.
That's fantastic, fantastic. And thanks for that. A few closing words, Bill.
I think we'd like to thank everybody, because I mean, COVID's been a tragic time. It's been a difficult time, but the green shoots, where are the green shoots, has given us time to step back and meet all of you amazing people today. And I think this has been the time for introspection and saying what's important, these green spaces, these sustainable things, and this innovative thinking. This can be a time of magical thinking. And I think the designers today are artists and artisans, and the use of these materials is incredible. So I think hopefully the message is out there, and what you've seen today is, some incredible things in the years ahead. So thank you so much. Thanks, David.
Thanks very much, everyone. Alora, Andrew, Miles, Charlie, Delphine, Graham, and to you too, Bill. Thanks very much indeed, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.